GOAT debate has always been an issue that has plagued the NBA community and has interested me specifically. It's a world filled with bias, contradictions, and hypocrisy. So many things that are hard to decipher. But I don't want to fall victim to the narratives, the hatred, the sheer stupidity. It's a mess, and I want something concrete. I want to find the best of the best.
I want to find out who's the greatest basketball player of all time using only individual stats. Who's the GOAT? Let's dig into it. Before I start, you might be wondering, why only individual stats? Well, this is why. First of all, it's hard to figure out how much a player contributes to team success. You could look at Michael Jordan going undefeated in the finals and say he's the greatest player of all time. But it's hard to tell how much he statistically contributed to that. Also, individual stats aren't inherently biased, which is helpful for what I'm trying to do. So with that being said, let's head to chapter 1. First up, we're going to have Bill Russell and Wilt Chamberlain. One defensively gifted, one an offensive stud. They both dominated the NBA for decades. Wilt averaged incredible stat lines, while Bill was a lockdown defender no matter what. Bill dominated the early years of the NBA, winning 11 championships, while Wilt snagged 2. But Chamberlain's sheer statistical anomalies will never be broken. Next up, we have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He was the greatest prospect to ever enter the NBA. He was an instant phenom, destroying records with incredible consistency. He ended up winning 6 championships for 2 different teams. Continuing on, we have Magic Johnson and Larry Bird, the creators of the most legendary rivalry in NBA history. One happy black dude and one perpetually sour-faced white guy. The perfect rivalry. Magic won 5 championships in the 80s, while Bird won 3, although he did win 3 straight MVPs. But then came the draft class of 1984. Pick number 1, we have Hakeem Olajuwon. And at number 3, we introduced Michael Jordan. Hakeem Olajuwon went on to become an offensive-defensive hybrid who won 2 championships for the city of Houston, bringing them to relevance for the first time ever. MJ, on the other hand, was special. He was elite and had the tenacity of a bull. He went on to go 6-0 in the finals and became the greatest scorer the NBA has ever seen. In the 90s, we have the dominance of Shaquille O'Neal, an obese man who bullied his way through sheer power points and rebounds. O'Neal won 4 championships for 2 different teams. On the contrary, we have Tim Duncan, a player who destroyed with such basic fundamentals it didn't even seem fair. Tim Duncan established a dynasty in San Antonio and delivered them relevance for the whole 2000s decade. Next up, we have MJ's only comparison, Kobe Bryant. Kobe was an absolute monster. He would take thousands of shots per day, always seeking constant improvement. He became one of the best pure scorers in NBA history and created 2 different championship windows for the Lakers. In the new millennium, it didn't take long for the next GOAT candidate to appear. In this corner, we have the chosen one, LeBron James. He lived up to the hype. LeBron is perhaps the greatest all-around player ever. He won 4 championships with 3 teams and is atop pretty much any record board you can dream up. Lastly, we introduce Stephen Curry, a skinny dude from Davidson who completely transformed the game with his incredible handles and mythical 3-point shooting. His skills led the Warriors to 4 championships. Find We start off with the most basic stats possible. Points per game, assists per game, which is how many passes you have that lead to points, rebounds per game, blocks per game, steals per game, and the negative detractor of turnovers per game. These are the baseline of any NBA-related argument and obvious inclusions. These stats have some flaws. Some people play more than others. How does one make sure that the volume of minutes doesn't impact the quantity of stats? Well, that's where per 100 possession stats come in. For example, if a player has 7 points and 3 rebounds in 25 possessions, then that player has 28 points and 12 rebounds per 100 possessions. And you can compare this to players who have played more or less minutes to see who is more efficient. So these are the new stats we're left with. Points per 100 possessions, assists per 100 possessions, rebounds per 100 possessions, blocks per 100 possessions, steals per 100 possessions, and turnovers per 100 possessions. And this is the full list of stats we have included in our formula so far. The last stats I decided to include were defensive and offensive rating. These stats basically tell you how efficient a player is at preventing points or creating points. Basically, the average offensive and defensive rating is 100. For offensive rating, a higher score is better. It means you're more efficient at creating points for yourself and your team. In defensive rating, if your score is lower, it means you're better at preventing points from being scored on you and your team. So this is the final list of every stat I will be including in my formula. Now this is one half of my formula. The second half is time periods. Now through my research, I found that people really care about 3 main periods in a GOAT debate. The first is career. Every minute, every second, every possession you play in an NBA uniform. All those stats added up and averaged out. The second time period is the prime of a player's career. This is the 5 years of their career where they were significantly better than any other years. This is Bernard King, and he was an absolute demon from 1981 to 1986. Those 5 years were his prime, where he was significantly better than any of his other years. The last time period is the playoffs. Every NBA player's goal is to play well in the playoffs so they can win an NBA championship. This is Lamar Odom, a notorious playoff riser with clutch shooting ability. He consistently elevates his game to be better in the playoffs than he is in the regular season. But I believe Now I have to decide how I should weigh every stat. What stats are more important than others? Well, according to the experts, this is what I found. I want to make a stat that benefits all around excellence, but slightly favors offense, as individual offense is more important than individual defense in the NBA. I would rather have a player who is great across the board than a player who is excellent in 1 or 2 categories. That being said, this is how basic stats are weighted. Points are the most important thing in basketball, so they are weighted at 2. Assists and rebounds can directly lead to points, so they are weighted at 1. Blocks, steals, and turnovers affect the game in lesser ways, so they are all weighted at 0.5. Per 100 stats are weighted higher because they provide more valuable intel about how efficient a player is. It's the same scale as the basic stats, but the values are 1.5 times higher. Points per 100 is weighted at 3, while assists and rebounds are both weighted at 1.5. Steals, blocks, and turnovers are all weighted at 1.75. Offensive rating and defensive rating are great encapsulating stats. I weighted offensive rating at 3 and defensive rating at 2 because, like previously stated, individual offense is more important than individual defense in the NBA. I also had to weight the time periods based off importance. Based on what I researched, most people consider career to be the least important part of a GOAT debate, so I weighted it at 2. Now, prime and playoffs, on the other hand, seem to be the main arguments for many GOAT debates, so I weighted them both at 3. So when I multiplied the actual stats by the time periods, these are the total weights of every stat in every time period I will be covering in my formula. Now that I have weighted every stat and time period, I know which ones are the most important. That leaves one more problem though. Not all stats are balanced. The average points per game is much greater than the average steals per game. I have to find a way to balance all these stats out for the weighted value to make a difference. This is how I solved that problem. So this is what one of my sheets would have looked like. We have player A, player B, player C, and player D. All these stats are unbalanced, so this is how I balanced them. Let's start off with career points per game. Player A had the most career points per game, so they got a value of 4. Player C had the least amount of career points per game, so they got a value of 1. Player B had the second least, so they got a value of 2, while player D got a value of 3. 4 is the greatest value possible because there's 4 players. I did the same with assists per game and rebounds per game. With these balanced numbers, I can multiply by each stat's weighted value and each time period's weighted value. For example, let's look at player A's career points per game. Player A got the 4 value as they had the most career points per game. I multiplied that by 2 and by 2. The first 2 is for the career. Weighted value of career is 2. And the weighted value of points per game is also 2. Compare that to career assists per game. Player A got the 2 value in his career assists per game. You multiply that by 2, because 2 is the weighted value of career, and then times 1, because 1 is the weighted value of assists.
They go Halle Berry or Hallelujah. Pick your poison, tell me what you're doing. Everybody go respect the shooter, but the one in front of the gun lives forever.
Now that I know what stats and time periods I'm using, what each stat and time period is weighted, and how to balance these stats, I can now actually start to calculate my formula and discover who is the greatest player of all time. A couple quick notes real quick. I couldn't actually include Will or Bill in my formula due to a lack of stats from their time period, but I wanted to include them as candidates just based off of respect. Secondly, Kareem has a lack of per 100 stats during his prime, so I had to take his per 100 stats from the years following his prime and use those instead, which means Kareem is actually a little undervalued in this stat, but it is what it is. After hours of collecting data and transferring it from Sports Reference and then balancing out all those stats on a numerical value 1 through 10, I was finally able to put it into one big spreadsheet and calculate my formula. C stands for career, P stands for prime, and PL stands for playoffs. Now let me show you all my calculations. The non-bolded value is the balanced version of the stat, and the bolded value is that balanced stat times the weighted value. Now that I have everything calculated, I can go down the line and look at every player from the least score to the highest score. Let's start. In 10th place, we have Kobe Bryant with 546.6 points. In 9th place, we have Magic Johnson with a score of 612.5. Following Magic, in 8th place, we have Shaquille O'Neal with a score of 645.75, barely edging out Shaq. In 7th place, we have Hakeem Olajuwon with 647.75 points. In 6th place, we have Tim Duncan with 650.25 points. Now, in the top half of this list, in 5th place, we have Stephen Curry with 695.75 points. In 4th place, we have Larry Bird with a score of 709. My top 3 is about synonymous with every other GOAT list out there. But what order are they ranked in? Let's see. In third place, we have Kareem Abdul-Jabbar with the score of 794.75. That leaves the age-old debate, Jordan or Bron, who is the greatest basketball player of all time, according to individual stats. In second place, we have LeBron James with a score of 872 points. Only leaves first place. In first place, we have Michael Jordan with 975.75 points. The undisputed GOAT of basketball. Or is he?
Can I talk my shit again? Can I talk my shit again?
What is there to be said about longevity? I can't compare the 12-year career of Magic Johnson to the 20-year career of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. It's not fair. So I found every player's career length, minus the years where they either didn't start a majority of the games, were hurt, or were below league average. This is it. One 20-year career, two 18-year careers, a 16-year career, two 15-year careers, a 14-year career, two 13-year careers, and a 12-year career. And the median career length was 15 years. So what I decided to value longevity, is this. Every year over the median career average of 15 is a 1.1 times bonus. Every year under the median career length is a 0.9 times bonus. For example, if you had a 16-year career, all of your career stats would be multiplied by 1.1. If you had an 18-year career, all of your career stats would be multiplied by 1.3. This is to give credit to longevity, but not have it overpower the whole formula. So this is the updated bottom 7, accounting for longevity. Kareem Abdul-Jabbar remains in third place with 851.15 points. That leaves us with the same top 2, Michael Jordan and LeBron James. Will LeBron's longevity be enough to outlast Jordan's pure greatness? Let's see. In second place, we have Michael Jordan with 951 points. Leaves one person left. LeBron James with a grand total of 978.75 points. LeBron James is the greatest player in the history of basketball, according to only individual stats.